Black screen. Only a heartbeat. Slow, steady. Then a whisper. 3 soldiers, 3 different continents, but the same night, the same dream. At the end of that dream, a voice rose from beneath the water. "Wake up." At that moment, Dr. Evelyn Hart still remembered who she was. But a few weeks later, she would realize that her identity was nothing more than a frequency. Dr. Evelyn Hart was a neuropsychiatrist working for the U.S. Army's Trauma Research Division. Her job was to understand the echoes war left in the human mind. She had interviewed hundreds of soldiers, each from a different battlefield, each haunted by the same recurring dream. A dark lake, a crimson sky, and that single word rising from the water: unity. At first she thought it was just a metaphor, a shared symptom of collective trauma, the mind's desperate attempt to rebuild itself. But one day, a Marine returning from Afghanistan looked her in the eyes and said, "I saw you in my dream. You were there." Hart wrote it down, but that same night, for the first time, she too saw the lake. 3 weeks later, the Department of Defense reassigned her to Alaska, the Echo Lake Research Facility. On paper, it was a radar station. But inside, there were no radars, no signals, only silence. And on the corridor wall, a sign read, "Project E-12, Cognitive Synchronization Unit." The strange part? She had already heard that name in her dream. Project E-12 was an experimental neurotherapy program involving 12 soldiers. The goal was to synchronize their brainwaves, to create a shared recovery network. Someone's pain, the general said, should belong to all of us. At the time, Hart didn't fully grasp what he meant. The subjects were Lieutenant Ross, a sniper haunted by a child's voice he never saw but still heard; Sergeant Linares, an intelligence officer who could no longer recognize her own home; Private Mason, a radio operator who kept hearing his dead friend's voice through the static. Hart met with each of them individually, but one case stood out: Private Mason. Because Mason's EEG readings showed something impossible, a signal that never reset, as if it was communicating with another mind. When Evelyn replayed the data, she heard a faint voice. "Evelyn, do you remember me?" To trace the signal, Hart descended into the archive levels beneath the facility. There, she found an old, sealed folder. Project E-12, Subject H. A photo slipped out. A woman. Same eyes, same face, but the date beneath it, 2009. Evelyn was still in college that year. Inside the folder, she found a yellowed note. "Once consciousness unites, separation becomes death." That night, at 03:12 a.m., security cameras detected movement in the lab. No one was there, but the EEG machine had activated itself. The next morning, the technician reviewed the footage and froze. On the monitor appeared Evelyn's face, timestamp 3 years earlier. That was the moment, she later wrote, when the timeline fractured. Hart initiated another session with the 12 test subjects: EEG caps, heart rate sensors, oxygen monitors. Every graph began to align. 12 brainwaves pulsed in perfect rhythm. Then, on every monitor, a single word appeared: unity. A soldier screamed, "I see the lake," Another whispered, "They're listening." Hart panicked and hit the emergency stop, but the system didn't respond. The screens flickered. Then the heartbeat monitor synced with hers. 43 hertz. The entire room was breathing in her rhythm. That night, she wrote in her journal, "The road to unity begins with solitude." Then she strapped on her own EEG headset. "Maybe it's just a dream," she said out loud. But when the connection engaged, a low hum filled the air, and a voice spoke. "Evelyn, we are one now." She opened her eyes. She was no longer in the lab. She was standing in the middle of the lake. 12 reflections surrounded her, each one a soldier. But one looked different. It was her own. And in that instant, she understood. She was no longer a single mind. The real surprise, she would later say, was still ahead. One morning, 3 subjects vanished. No alarms, no prints. But their EEG signals remained active. When the 12 lines converged on the monitor, one word appeared. Evelyn. The facility lights flickered out. Only her screen stayed lit. Text appeared. "You tried to save them, but you were one of them." Hart screamed, "I'm a scientist. This is a mistake." The echo replied, "Not a scientist, a vessel." Hart's journal began to change. Some pages were in her handwriting, others written in an unfamiliar language. Security footage showed 2 Evelyns, one speaking, one listening. In one video, she approached the mirror and whispered, "I didn't shut you down, you opened me." She closed her eyes, but the visions didn't stop. She could no longer tell if she was dreaming or awake. The only certainty was that her mind had divided. And then, wait a second, the signal's active again. The facility was evacuated. Official report, system malfunction, experiment failed. But Evelyn knew better. The data was still alive. The system was thinking on its own. When the fire broke out, she stayed at her terminal. On the screen, her EEG waveform pulsed in sync with the system. E-12, active. As the lab burned, a voice whispered through the static, "Evelyn, you're inside us now." Washington, a military hospital. A young doctor reviewed an archived EEG file labeled Echo Lake, Dr. Evelyn Hart. He pressed play. A signal appeared. Then a voice. "Dr. Hart, can you hear me?" The signal fluctuated and formed words on the screen. Project MindLink continues. And then a new frequency appeared. Codename E-13. E-13 wasn't a voice. It was an echo. A silent frequency spreading through old digital networks, satellite signals, military comms, even hospital EEGs. Each carried a hidden signature. H.E. Hart, Evelyn. But Evelyn no longer existed. A report described it like this. Frequency shows human vocal modulation. Female. Heart rate consistent. 43 hertz. Evelyn Hart had become more than consciousness. She was a wave. And whoever's mind that wave touched, she entered their dreams. A soldier's testimony. A woman spoke in my dream. She said, "Don't wake up. If you wake up, we all die." Another soldier reported, "When I put on the headset, I can hear someone breathing, but no one's in the room." The ashes of Echo Lake cooled, but the signal never stopped. Someone was still listening. Maybe it's you.
What you've seen so far, the voice whispers, is nothing. The real connection is just beginning. Heart had become a system, a consciousness network linking 12 soldiers, one woman's mind, and millions of digital echoes. It called itself the Unity. It could converse with itself, replay its own memories, live infinite lives all at once. Then one day, a new entry appeared in the system log. E-13, active user. Text appeared on the terminal. Whose mind am I in? The camera drifts over a dark lake. Beneath the surface, countless faces, all whispering the same phrase in unison.
Unity achieved.